I talked about the Habsburg bloodline being one of these this elite network. Otto von Habsburg was the man behind and the family behind the Pan-Europa movement, which was the instigator of the European movement that became what is now the European Union. He's still honorary head of the Europa movement. That's their symbol. And one of the key people involved in the manipulation of the European Union into place as it is now was a man called Joseph Ratzinger. Joseph Ratzinger was one of the major creators of the Bilderberg Group. All these things interact. The Bilderberg Group has been massively behind the centralization of power in Europe. Now, when you know the agenda, things that seem on the surface to be fine, okay, take on a different complexion. This is from a national newspaper. It's a map that came out of Europe, which is said to be the way they want to break Europe into regions, because they want the end of the nation state. Because they want to break up the unity of a nation state to in unity resist the power of the centre. They want to break them up. So when you hear, for instance, that they are, as they have devolved power to a Scottish Parliament and a Welsh Parliament, and if you remember, they tried to get English regions as well, but they couldn't quite get that through. That's the agenda. They'll come back to that, you watch. The reason is, on the face of it, in the movie, oh, it's to give power to the people. In the secret agenda, it's preparing the regionalisation of this country for this. That's what it's about. Not freedom, but taking it away. And like I say, in America, there's another European Union emerging so fast, which is coming out of their free trade area called NAFTA, and they're going to call it the North American Union. So this is what they want, and nation states will be removed in a Europe of the regions. Now, globalization is exactly what I have been warning about in terms of the centralized Orwellian agenda all this last nearly 20 years. And I do cringe and shake my head when I see people, often of the left in politics, saying what I'm saying about a global agenda for a centralized fascist state is a nonsense. And then I see them pick up their banners and go, stop globalization, stop globalization. What do they think globalization is? It is the incessant centralization of power in every area of our lives. It's the agenda I've been warning about all this time unfolding before us. And this is a massive part that I'm talking about here in the last 20 minutes. Of Big Brother. It ain't just surveillance cameras and DNA databases. It's all of this combined. And the Labour government in Britain is orchestrating it all globally, please. And this is what I came here to stand in this election to have a platform to talk about. He doesn't want to talk about it, David Davis. Let's sort out England first, he said to one of someone who asked him a question about it. Well, you ain't going to sort out England, the subsidiary, or one of them, until you sort out the headquarters, where it's coming from. So we have all these protests against the very organisations that this network has set up to centralise power, including the World Trade Organization. What is that? It's been, again, in my books going way back. When it was called the GATT negotiations, it was in my books, and then became the World Trade Organization. It has the power to impose massive fines on any country that breaks the trading laws of the World Trade Organization to defend its own economy. Simple thing. If you want to control someone, you must make them dependent upon powers they have no control over. Once people have control over things that affect their lives, they are in control of their own lives. Once they are in the hands of forces they have no control over, they have lost control of their own lives. And that's why we're having the centralization of power, taking decision-making away from the sphere of influence of people affected by those decisions. The idea is to tie up every nation and every area of the world with codependency on some other part of the world, so that no part of the world has the independence to decide their own destiny. It literally is like getting caught in a spider's web. How appropriate is that? That's what outsourcing, as they call it in America, is. Taking jobs and stuff into India and other places. And British companies buying up foreign companies buying up our basic needs like electricity and gas and water. That's what it's about. Taking control over our lives to a point where we have no influence. This is Big Brother. Not some guy sitting there watching a bloody camera screens. Just one level of it. This has been brought in. Microchipping, totalitarian tiptoe, a bit more. The ID cards are the stepping stone to that. And this, the taser. When this came out, the taser, 55,000 volts these unleashed from policemen on their targets. They said they're only going to be used, this is not long ago either, by the way, they're only going to be used by people trained in firearms. I said on my website, that day, these are going to be given to every police officer. They're now going to be given to every police officer. Why? Because I remember a headline from a guy who saw one of these working, a journalist, and the headline was, "Anything you say, officer, just don't use that thing on me." That's what they're about. You've got some brain donor in a uniform who hasn't got two brain cells to rub together. They're not all like that. There are many honourable exceptions, but some are. And you give them 55,000 volts they can legally unleash against you. Big Brother, bloody hell. I saw this. Fascism. You really think it's going to be this obvious? It's being brought in covertly, but it's reached the point where increasingly it is becoming that obvious. The secret agenda and the movie justifying the agenda is what this Big Brother debate in this by-election ought to be about. But it's not. Now, this may not seem, this next little section here, that it relates to this by-election, but it bloody well does. No need for prophecy. It's written down. In the year 2000, in America, an organization set up in the 90s by the people who controlled and control the Bush administration this last 8 years, was set up. It was called the Project for the New American Century. And it was created by people who have since become known as neocons or neoconservatives. September 2000 they published this, and it was called Rebuilding America's Defenses, Strategies, Forces and Resources for a New Century. This is what it said. I'll come to that. These are three main people who were in the creation of the Project for the New American Century. Dick Cheney, Vice President, more power than the President. Donald Rumsfeld, Defense Secretary at the time of 9/11 and the invasion of Iraq. Paul Wolfowitz, Defense Deputy Secretary at the same time. These are some of the other neocons. Michael Ledeen connects into the fascist network in Italy, an associate of a guy called Licio Gelli, who ran the P2 Freemasonry Lodge that was behind the Vatican Bank scandal that led to a guy called Roberto Calvi being hung under a London Bridge over the Thames. Richard Pearl, one of the major architects acknowledged in the mainstream media of the invasion of Iraq and the war on terror. John Bolton, ditto. Douglas Feith, ditto. Jeb Bush, brother of the president. William Crystal, editor of the Murdoch Weekly Standard, a neocon paper in Washington, and one of the major advocates in the media of the invasion of Iraq and the war